This video is a tutorial for building Java programs, Chapter 5, which specifically is about indefinite loops, and this video is specifically about fence posts and sentinels. So first of all, let's review what is a fence post and what is a sentinel. Let's do the canonical example of a fence post here. We'll call it a simple fence post. Okay, and let's create this function. So a fence post is a situation. A fence post is really it's a type of problem. Okay, and let me put a Java comment here. So we know that a fence post, the general case of a fence post problem is you've got n items with n-1 separators. Okay, so what are the typical kind of things? If we have posts is a number, and the fence commas, then we can do 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we have 4 numbers here and 3 commas. Okay, that's a real simple example. Another example is the posts could be letters, and the fence could be dashes. Okay, so hello becomes HELLO. Or maybe the posts could equal words, and the fences could be and. Okay, so we have hello and there and how and are and you. Okay, lots of different types of things. Now, they don't always have to be output related, and we'll come back to this. A fence post problem can be anything where you have an operation such as maybe it's like generate a card, then sum. Okay, if we want to have that over and over and over, but the last one we have to throw away the last one. Okay, that is also something where we're going to need a fence post. But we'll get to that later. Let's delete that and just stick with the simple fence post problem. So let's write a simple fence post problem. We'll take that first problem. So this problem is going to be the simplest one. So it's just going to be printing numbers. So first of all, let's review how do we print numbers. Let's have a simple for loop. Well, let's just do I equals 0, and well, I is less than 10, and I plus plus. Let's make it starting at 1. Okay, and let's do a system.out.print of the number plus comma. Okay, let's just try this. Run that. And so we get these numbers here. And the problem is that we have the comma off the end. Okay, so a fence post, what we need to do is we need to do a half loop and a full loop. And I always encourage students to think about what is the normal order that is going to end up with one too many fence sections here. Okay, what that full loop is printing number followed by a comma. Okay, that's what would normally work. Then when you want to use a loop and a half, so we call this the loop and a half algorithm. Okay, so if we're going to do a loop and a half, we're going to have to reverse this. So instead it's going to be comma followed by number. Okay, that is how you figure out what the full loop is. You figure out what is the normal way of doing it, and then you reverse it. Okay, so I'll set full loop reversed. Okay, and then a half loop is just the first one of those posts, okay, which is the first number, because if we're going to start here with a comma, we have to have a number for it, right? So this is going to be print the first number. Okay, so we're going to do a sys out on just 1, And then we've got to start here at 2, and we're going to reverse this to be comma plus I. Let's run that. Okay, I've got just changing it from println to print. All right, so that is a simple fence post there. All right. Now let's take a look at the next fence post. It's not a whole lot different. It's just letters, right? Okay, so we'll do letters fence post, and I'm gonna copy this. Oh, and we actually need a word. Let's take a string S. Okay, and let's call this with hello. So here we're going to print letters separated by dashes. Okay, so what we're going to do here is let's figure out, like I said before, we know that we're going to have to do a half loop and a full loop, but let's just go ahead and do the full loop first. Okay, so for int index equals 0, 0 because we're dealing with strings now, we're going to have to do caret. Index is less than the s.length, and index plus plus. And now let's try doing the sys out of, so we want the s.caret index followed by a dash. Okay, and instead of print, let's do a print, right? So let's just run that. Okay, so I need a new line here just to get me out of here. Okay, so let's run that. All right, so we've got the hello with the dash sticking off the end. Okay, so I always want you to think of what is the full loop, what is the normal order. The full loop normal order is print letter followed by a comma, right? Okay, so now what we're going to do is to, and I'm going to note, this is a fence post problem with loop and half algorithm. So the half loop is going to be printing the first letter. The full loop reversed is now printing a comma followed by a letter. Okay, so let's do that. So we're going to sys out the first s.char at 0. And not println, but print. Very common problem. Okay, and then here we are going to reverse this. Okay, so now we are going to take this and stick it at the end. Okay, let's try running that. Okay, I've got two. Oh, right, because I've got to change that. We're only going to print this, start printing the second one, right? Okay, so that's another one. Let's take another example here, and let's do a fence post with a sentence. Hello there, how are you? Okay, so let's go down and create that. All right, so let's put a comment here. This is print words of sentence separated by and. Okay. Now, how are we going to get the words out of this sentence? So what we're going to, there are a couple of really complicated solutions, but there's a very simple one, and that is to use a scanner. So I'm going to set up a scanner on the sentence. And now we can actually pull, I'm going to need to just add an import here. So we're going to actually pull the words off of here. So first let's just demonstrate that. So while sc dot has next, we'll check whether it's got a string, and then let's just do a sys out of sc.next, and then add a space. Actually, let's put and, right? We're supposed to use and, so let's do that. Okay, let's just run this right now. Okay, first I've got to get myself a sys out just to get a separation line there, and then sentence is undefined for F Sentinel. Okay. Oh, I just got to put a space there. Let's try that. Okay, hello and there. Okay, let's get rid of the println and change it to print. Hello and there and how and are and you and. Okay, so that works. And now we just have to figure out. So let's do this. I'm just going to grab this comment for quickness. Full loop. So let's start with print word followed by and. Okay, that's what we did as a full loop. Now what we're going to do is we're going to reverse this. So we're going to take the word and we're going to put it over here. We're going to take that and put it right there. And then we've got the half loop. We get the first word. Okay, so we need to sys out sc.next. Now I'm not checking whether it has next, so this would crash if I didn't have any words. But we'll go ahead and do that. And then here we're going to take this and stick it at the end. Okay. Hello and there and how and are and you. Okay, so you can see in all three of these cases, basically the same operation. I just showed you in different applications. What you want to do is you want to figure out what is the normal order of things. Okay. Go ahead and write that code. Get it to work. Okay. Then, in order to prevent that last one from coming out, reverse the order of operations, put the first one beforehand, and then in here you've reversed the order. Sometimes you have to skip that first one or something like that. In this case, we didn't have to skip anything because we're using next, which already skips it. And that's pretty much all there is. Okay, so that is the heart of the fence post. We're going to come back to fence post later, but I want to now tackle sentinels. Okay, so let's do a simple, actually I should be using lowercase, simple sentinel. And here, I'm going to show you this cool function here, refactor, rename. We just changed that to a lowercase s here. Notice how it's already changed there. Okay. Oh, let's try that again. There was some error. Refactor, rename, lowercase s. There's error. Oh, it's because I haven't finished this here. Okay, let's try it again. And here, refactor is Alt-Shift-R. And here, Alt-Shift-R. Okay, simple sentinel. And let's go down and define simple sentinel now. Okay, so simple sentinel. So let's talk about what sentinel loops look like. So sentinel loops usually have to do with user input, but not always, but they typically do. And Sentinel Loops are, we repeat a action until we reach a Sentinel value. Okay, so it could be, in the simple case is ask a user for integers, or let's say ask a user for integers and sum them until -1 entered. Okay, that's pretty much the simple, straightforward case. I'm going to show you a variant of that, and that is what happens if we do it until 0 is entered. Does that make a difference? We'll see. Another case that I could say is, and it's from the book as well, is ask user for guesses until a number is guessed. Okay. And return count of guesses. Here it's, and print the sum. Okay. So that's 3 possibilities here. So let's do the simplest one first. So simple Sentinel. So we are going to ask for an integer, all right? And then we're going to sum that integer. And we've got a loop here, right? So we know we've got a loop. We're going to ask for an integer and sum that integer. And then these things, let's go ahead and indent these, because those have to happen inside the loop. And stop when Sentinel value -1. Okay, so that's the overall pseudocode for that. So let's try to do this a simple way. Let's have do, and we've got this in here. Let's go ahead and put let's do that. Okay, so we're going to ask for an integer, so we're going to give them a prompt. Okay, so we're going to give them a prompt, and then we need to get... Oh, that's why. I never terminated this function. Okay, so we need to create a scanner. On the system.in. All right. Okay, so we're gonna get that number. So let's go ahead and have a int number out here. So num is equal to sc.nextInt. Okay, so that gets the number, and then we're gonna have a sum. So we're gonna have an int sum, and let's initialize it to 0. Okay, so sum plus equals num, and then we're going to stop when the Sentinel value is -1. Okay, so we're going to do this while num doesn't equal -1. And then finally, we're going to print the sum, right? So we're going to sys out that sum. And let's say the sum is... All right, let's try running that. Okay, I need to just put a little sys out here to end that. Run it again. Okay, please enter an integer. So let's do 1, 2, 3, and then -1. Okay, so 3 plus 2 is 5, plus 1 should be 6. But instead we're getting 5. Why is that? Well, that's because when we entered that -1 here, then adding this number here made it go down from 6, instead of 6, it brought it down to 5. Okay, so we don't want to do this last one here. So we now I want to point out the relationship between a fence post and a sentinel. So in a fence post, we had an action. We had a fence post, and we had a fence. All right. In this case, it's actually very similar. The post is getting the number. The fence is sum the number. Okay, and this last thing here, we don't want to do the last one. So when we get numbers of 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus -1, this last one here is like, this plus -1 is like the last piece of wire that hangs off. Remember when we did a fence post and we had 1, 2, 3, okay? And we didn't want the extra comma there. So it's the same kind of thing here, except we're adding, the adding is the second thing going on here. And we actually end up doing the exact same thing as we did with the fence posts. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to do, this is the full loop. So the full loop is reversed. So normally we would get number, then, I'll get rid of the comma. So we're going to get a number, then sum, okay? So to reverse it, we're going to have to do the sum, then get the number, okay? Then the half loop is get first number. So we're going to have to get the first number here. Then to do this full loop reversed, we're going to have to sum it first, then ask for the integer. Okay, so if we get 1 here, then it's going to add that to the sum, and then it's going to ask for the second number, 2. It's going to add that. It's going to ask for the number, next number. It's going to get 3. It's going to add that. It's going to ask for the next number. It's going to be -1, and then it's going to exit. Let's see if this works. 1, 2, 3, -1. Hey, it worked! Isn't that amazing? Now, normally what you'll see is you'll see this reversed. So we, instead of the do while, we'll have while. Sorry, I don't need that first while. That's while this, and there's no do at the end, but that's basically what it's doing. And it should be the exact same thing. 1, 2, 3, -1. Okay. There is one difference though. What happens if I run and I enter -1? That works. Okay. Let's go back here. Yeah, right there. Okay. Let's go back to this way. If I run this and I put -1, what's happening? So here, when I put -1, it went ahead and executed this, the first, well, it's past the first element. It's going into the second element and asking for a second one before we do this. And that's why you can't generally do this, this down here. You need to do it up here because just the way the problem is specified, we want to take the first time that the user enters a value of -1, you want to stop it from doing it. And that's why, well, I can't paste that for some reason. Let's do this over again. And that's why you need to put the while up here, okay? And let me move this up as well. Okay, so let's review that again. So what do we have to do when we're doing a Sentinel loop? We end up doing the exact same thing as a loop and a half because we get the first item up front, then we check the Sentinel before we get into the loop, and then we reverse the order of the operations, okay? So instead of getting a number and then summing, we're summing it and then getting a number, okay? So that's kind of the canonical Sentinel loop. Now I want to show you another Sentinel loop here. I've got another one here. Ask the user for integers and then until the sum is 0 and then print the sum. Now, is that one any different? You would think that it's not going to be. Let's set up a second method though. Actually, I don't want to. I'm going to comment this out, and then I'm going to do simple. What should I call this? Medium. Okay, so I'm going to call this medium Sentinel. Let's go in here and let's copy the whole thing to start. I'm not sure how much I'm going to need or not. Let's call this. I don't like the name, but I'm just going to do it for now. Okay, so, and let's copy the comment here. I'm going to modify it. All right, so here, let's go straight for this one. So what difference could it make if we have a 0? Okay, let's go back to the Fencepost. Actually, I just deleted those lines. Let's go here. Let's go back to the Fencepost. So remember we had the 1, 2, 3. Okay, so in here we're going to be doing 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 0. Okay, now when you do 1 plus 3, 2 plus 3 plus 0, is that plus 0 a problem? It actually isn't. Sometimes the last number or the last thing you do, you don't have to throw it away. Okay, so it could be a null string concatenating, or it could be plus 0, or it could be times 1, or anything like that where you don't care about the last one. Another example is I have a blackjack assignment, and you have to deal the cards. Well, it's a deal the card, sum, deal the card, sum, deal the card, sum. Now, when you go over 21, you actually don't want to throw away the sum. You actually want to know that the user busted. Okay, so it's a similar type of situation. So in that situation, you actually don't need to do the loop and a half because it's not a Fencepost problem. So that means here, see, I'm gonna change this to be 0. Okay. And here I'll change it to we don't care about summing 0. Okay, so I'm going to leave that comma there. Normally we don't want that comma, but since it's plus 0, it doesn't matter. Okay, so let's get rid of this half loop, or I'll put it in here. So we're going to get the first number, and then we're going to get a number, and then we're going to sum the number. We don't need to ask it again. And here, let's just do, and the number doesn't equal 0. Okay, so now what this is going to do, we're not going to do the full loop reversed. We're just going to do get number, then sum, and stop when it's 0. We can now put this down here. So it's going to get the first number. Let's suppose the first number is 0. If the first number is 0, sum is still going to be 0. And while the number doesn't equal 0, it's going to stop there, and it's going to print the sum as 0. Assuming we get more than one number, we'll get 1, sum 2, sum 3, sum 0. It's going to sum it, but that's fine. And then here it's going to exit out. So let's try running this now. Okay, let's try 0 first of all. Sum is 0. Great, worked. Let's try 1, 2, 3, 0. The sum is 6. So that actually worked. So what was the difference between these two, other than the fact that we were looking for 0 instead of -1? What that changed is, in this case, plus 0 doesn't matter. So it's like printing the comma, but we don't care about the comma in this case because plus 0 is the identity. Whereas here, adding a -1, that was a bad thing. Okay, that's not going to work. And similarly here, if I was getting numbers to be multiplied, actually let's start. We can't take 1 as a real number. Let's do, if we did 2 times 3 times 4 times 1, 1 would be the final number, the Sentinel value that we're looking for. Here again, 1 times 1 doesn't matter. Okay, so in that, if we were doing multiplying numbers together and times 1 was the Sentinel value, we wouldn't have to do the loop and a half. Okay, we just do this simple for loop of getting the number and summing it, getting the number and summing it. Okay, and again, in the case of blackjack, so we have a draw card and then sum the card. Okay, in blackjack, when we get to the last value, busting over 21, we still want to sum that card. Right? We need to know what the value is that he busted over 21. Okay? So in this case, we didn't need the loop and a half. Okay? So a Sentinel loop doesn't always need the loop and a half. If a Sentinel loop needs to throw away that last value, then it's a fence post problem, actually. But instead of being output, it's actually input. So you remember earlier I was saying fence post is usually output, but sometimes it can be input. Okay, I don't want you to get you too confused. Basically, if it looks like it's an output problem with n items and n-1 separators, that's a fence post. Okay, if it's an input problem and you have a certain value that you're looking for, that is a Sentinel loop. Okay, but a Sentinel loop can be solved with a loop and a half. It's never wrong to do the loop and a half. You can always do the loop and a half. Okay. In this case, we could do it. Let's go ahead and do it just to see whether we could do that. Okay. Can we do this? Can we reverse it? So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to get the first number. So this is the half loop. We're going to get the first number, and then the full loop reversed is going to be sum first, then get the number. Okay, so let's sum, and then we're going to get the number, and then we've got to move this while to up here. Okay, let's move this comment up here as well. So now let's try running that. Let's see if this still works. Okay, let's hit 0. It worked. Okay, and let's try putting some real numbers in. 1, 2, 3, 0, number 6. See, so it's never wrong to do the loop and a half. It isn't. It's never wrong. You can always do this. And from that perspective, maybe for Sentinel loops, you should just always do the loop and a half. But I wanted to explain, some students are always asking, you know, is it always while something? Or can you use do something? And the answer is it depends on whether you need to throw the last one away and or do you need to avoid doing the operation, the summing or whatever it is, the first time around. Okay. If so, then you have to check the while up front. Okay, so that is the end of the review that tutorial that I wanted to give you. So we've covered two things. We've covered a fence post and the Sentinel loop. So the things that you should really know are, number one, what does a fence post look like? What does a Sentinel loop look like? Okay, a fence post is usually always going to be output. It's going to be when you have n items with n minus 1 separators, and you can think of that as posts and fences, right? You don't want a piece of wire hanging off the end of your fence. It could take the form of numbers, it could take the form of letters, it could take the form of words. It can even take the form of input, right? In the form of a Sentinel loop. But we're gonna leave that. Okay. So the solution to a fence post problem is the loop and a half algorithm. Okay. That's the next thing you need to know is what's the algorithm. So what you do is you figure out what the full loop is that would get you the wrong thing, which get you the dash off the end, the comma off the end. Okay. Then you reverse the order of those two things. You need to figure out what the two things are. Okay. Comma and then a number. Okay. So they reverse it. So instead of number and comma, you print the comma and the number, and then you got to print the first one outside. For Sentinel loops usually always look like input, where you are looking for a particular value. It could be random number generation, though. Okay. And anything when you're doing some operation, then checking the value. Doing an operation, checking the value. Okay. That's a Sentinel. And as we just finished up reviewing, it's always safe, it's always correct to do the Sentinel loop with a loop and a half, okay? So just like for the fence post, you got to figure out what is the normal order of operations, okay? So is it a number and then summing it, a number and then summing it, or is it dealing a random card and then adding that, dealing a random card and then adding it? Or is it asking a user for a number and adding it, etc.? Okay, so you figure out what the normal order is. Okay, in this case, it was numbers and then summing. Okay, so you write that. Okay, then you reverse the order. So now I'm going to sum and followed by getting the number. And I have to get my first number outside the loop for the half loop. Okay, so Sentinel loops and fence post loops are very closely tied. Okay, so you can solve any Sentinel with a fence post. Sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it's not. Depends on whether you're going to throw the last one away. Okay, but by learning the loop and a half, you can solve both the fence post and the Sentinel loop. So it's a very good thing to learn. All right. So hopefully by now you should know, how do you identify a fence post? How do you identify a Sentinel? Okay, how do you identify those problems? 2, how do you figure out what's the algorithm to solve them? Okay, you should know it's a loop and a half. To solve that, you figure out what are the two things going on in this loop. You write that loop, then you reverse the order, okay? And you have to do the first one outside, the first post you have to do outside of that loop, okay? So that's the half loop. All right, so hopefully you found this useful. I would suggest you go ahead and try a couple of these examples to make sure that you understand what a fence post and what a Sentinel loop look like and how to write them. I would definitely think very concretely about what is the half loop, what is the full loop, okay? You reverse the full loop and you put the first part of that loop outside for the half loop. If you do that, it'll work for you every time. All right, so if you found that helpful, please like and subscribe. I post new videos all the time. I have a complete curriculum for teaching Java through the Building Java Programs book and the Practice It website. I have a lot of those Practice It problems as well. So please like and subscribe. Thank you.